Hey, what is up everybody, Reubin here. My name's Reubin and welcome back to Car Mechanic Simulator 2015. So, in the last episode we were able to complete, I think it was 3, maybe 4 jobs, pretty simple jobs, and we are going to pick up from where we left off. So once again we need to move straight up and find a job for us. Now the only 2 available to us, obviously we can decline them, which I think I'm going to decline these 2 because I can't actually do them, is tapping sounds from the engine bay and controlling of the car feels loose. So let's take the tapping from the engine bay and let's have a look at what part needs to be replaced within the engine, if it has actually got anything to do with the engine itself, because the clutch pressure plate needs to be replaced. The clutch pressure plate is by the gearbox, and for that we need to access the underside of the car. So we can move it over to the left lifter, but I think in the meantime I'm also going to bring up that the controlling of the car feels loose. So we're going to have 2 jobs running at the same time. So what seems to be the problem with this car? So with this car, the outer tie rod seems to be a problem. The outer tie rod is a simple fix. So we move it to the right lifter. We'll raise this one up. And we'll raise this one up as well. Okay, so the clutch pressure plate on this one is... Oh, way too far back. The clutch pressure plate on this one is underneath the gearbox, but in order to get to the gearbox we need to remove the front drive shaft along with the front drive axles on either side, as well with the tires, because in order to get that off you need to access the bolt that is covered by the rim itself. But I think before we get to this job we're going to do this one, because this one is a relatively easy job, the outer tie rod. Now we just need to determine which tie rod it is, and as we can see right there, if we switch over our views, that is the problem right there. So once again, pretty simple job. So we're just going to click on the rim, remove the rim itself, that way we can access the outer tie rod. Remove it. There we go. Now that is simply just a case of now running back. I know which part I need, so I don't need to double check that. So we jump in over here, go to the car part shop, and outer tie rod. Now we just need to type in tie, and that's what I need. Now for this one, let's get the part we need as well. We need the clutch pressure plate. So while I'm here, it's only one part I need, so we'll just get that as well. Clutch pressure plate. There we go. Okay, so this job over here is relatively simple. The other job is simple as well. I know exactly where the problem is. It's just a case of removing the parts in order to get in there. So we'll replace the outer tie rod on this one, bolt it back into place, and then just simply put the rim back on. Okay, so that is that car done. Now should it just double check. There we go, outer tie rod, we got $41 from that, and finish. Now with this one, we need to remove both sets of wheels on either side. Well, not both sets of wheels, just the 2 front wheels we need to take off, because we need to access the front drive axle, which we need to unbolt through there. Now that that's off, we can access the rim on this side. And that one's off now. And then also, once again, just remove the front drive axle. There we go. Now that that's off, we can remove the drive shaft itself. And then I do believe we sit with a problem, because we need to get the starter off. But in order to get the starter off, we need to access it from the engine. So pop open the hood, drop down to the center over here, click on the starter, just zoom in so we can see it. We need to access that because that is actually attached to the gearbox itself. So in order for us to open up the gearbox or strip the gearbox, that piece needs to be off. Okay, let's sit back underneath under the car, and now we've actually got free access to it. So pull the gearbox. There we go, and there we go. Now it's just in the case of removing the clutch sparing, and then we should have access to the clutch pressure plate, and then underneath that is the clutch plate itself. Yep, there's the clutch plate over there. But we don't need the clutch plate. We simply just need to replace it with the new part that we already bought. As you can see, shiny and new. bolt these back into place. And then replace the clutch bearing. Put the gearbox back on. Okay, now with that being in place, we can actually finish off everything we need to under the car. So that includes putting the drive shaft back on, putting the front axle back in place, bolting that into place, and then slapping the tire on this side. Okay, then we can jump over to the other side, where we can put the drive axle on that side, bolt it back into place, and then simply slap the tire on again. Okay, now with those parts back into place, if we actually go into the work order, it shows us that the clutch pressure plate has been replaced. We earned $176 from that, but we are not done because we need to put the starter that we removed back in. Now the nice thing is there's always an easy way to check. For example, if you try and finish off the job, now even though it's telling me the job is done, if I try and finish it, it'll tell me that the car is incomplete because it's missing a part, the starter. So if ever you aren't sure that you've missed out on something, possibly it was a big job and you've stripped away a lot, firstly check your inventory. It'll tell you if there were any excess parts that possibly are lying inside there, or to simply go over there and try and finish the job. If the job finishes, it means you replaced everything. If it doesn't, it means that you've left something out. So we'll put that starter back into place. Now as you can see, this car's general condition is not that good. The manifold cover here is pretty rusted. The engine block itself, the throttle system, the spring caps over here, everything is looking a little bit run down. But our only job was to replace the clutch pressure plate, and that has been done. So complete the job. There we go. Another 2 jobs nice and simply out the window. Okay, but let's have a look at the next 2 jobs that we've got in front of us. So, lack of engine power and controlling the car feels loose. Now, normally when they refer to controlling the car feels loose, it's something to do with the suspension. So, it could possibly be, for example, once again, a tie rod, either the outer or inner tie rod. So, let's take that job as well. Wait for it to just pop in the car. Now, this is the Royal Bianco. And let's have a look. And it is the sway bar front end link A. Okay, so the end link A, we can buy that part straight away. End link A, there we go. Now that is obviously by the front suspension, and then we have to move this, unfortunately, to one of the lifters. But while that's moving over, lack of engine power. We'll take that job as well. Okay, there we go. We've got the final car here in front of us. So, what needs to be done on this one? So, the intake manifold and the throttle needs to be replaced. Both of those are relatively easy to get to. So, throttle 14 and intake manifold 14. So, it's both for 1.4 liters. So, intake manifold 14. Was it just the standard intake manifold that needs to be replaced? Or was it actually... Yeah, 14 DI. Okay. Intake manifold 14 DI. That's the one we need. And then we need the throttle. Throttle 14, that one. So, these are relatively 2 simple parts, and I can do this job from here. Because it's both of these parts that are actually connected to one another right here. Okay, now for some reason it's saying that I can't access it. And now I can. Well, probably just a bit of a glitch. But, so we can remove the throttle itself. We can remove the intake manifold. Now this one you can see has got quite a couple of bolts that needs to be undone. And this is where that upgrade for fastening and unfastening this bolt will come into play. Because it makes this job just so much easier. Okay, now it's simply a case of putting the new one on. As you can see, bright, shiny and new. And I'll tell you what, later on. Oh my gosh, English is out the window today. I'll tell you what, later on, the game becomes interesting because when you end up building your entire engine, when you end up buying everything from scratch, you've got your own project car that you're doing, you've sold off all the rusted and useless parts that the car came with, and you end up building an engine. When you end up building a performance engine, especially if you've got, for example, a V8 with the butterfly sticking out the bonnet and all of the performance parts, including the camshafts, the engine block, everything is performance parts, the car looks beautiful. And the engine is just something that is, oh my gosh, just something to truly behold. But We will get there in due time. So this job, we got a total profit of $769. Both the intake manifold and the throttle were successfully replaced. So, done. Now this one was a case of the sway front end link A. Oh my gosh, that's a mouthful. What the hell is a swant? Okay, so let's have a look. Which one is bust? Can I see it in there? That one looks to be okay. That one looks to be bust. Now, if you guys aren't sure what part I'm talking about, it's this section right there. But unfortunately, in order for us to remove it, the rim needs to come off. Okay, so that's off. Now we can simply pan around, grab the front end link A, and remove it. There we go. Now it's simply a case of replacing it with a new one once again. And as always, shiny and new. And then just slap the tire back on and we should be done. So slowly but surely it is starting to introduce us into new things. For example, with the manifold, before I continue the chain of thought, $57 total is what we got from that job. Okay, so back to the train of thought. So, slowly but surely, it's introducing us into new contracts. It's introducing new aspects of the game. You're starting to get more in-depth into the engine, what parts need to be replaced. And slowly but surely, obviously, the things will become harder. In the beginning, it's still very much holding your hand, telling you what you need to do, where you need to go, what parts need to be replaced. Eventually, we will not have that luxury. So, let's sell all these parts that we have. Okay, so all of that has been sold. We are sitting on $3,409. We've got 780 experience. So I think once we've done another 2 more jobs, we'll be able to upgrade our fastening and unfastening. So timing needs replacing, and engine oil and filter needs to be replaced. I can take that job. I can actually take both of them. Both of them are relatively straightforward. Once again, this is the Reno Piccolo. We've got it here in front of us. And the job that needs to be done on this one is just drain the oil and the oil filter itself. Now, both of those are done from under the car, the oil filter and everything is there. And that is why I moved this in the first episode. But obviously, with me exiting and coming back in, it's reset it in its original place. Because if you drain the oil and that is not underneath the sump tank, you have a problem because it ends up costing you money because you actually spend up $100 cleaning up an oil spill. So, we will move this over to the left lifter. And at the same time, we will start the job of the timing parts need to be replaced. So, take job. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the oil filter on the Piccolo over here is a oil filter 14. I just want to double check. Yes, it is. Oil filter 14. So we can buy that part. And then also what I need for this. Belt tensioner, timing belt, and water pump. So this is almost exactly the same. Well, it is exactly the same as the first job we did. So let's bring up the filters. I need the oil filter 14. I need the water pump 14. I need the tensioner. And I need the timing belt itself as well. And I need timing belt. That one. I do believe I bought all the correct parts. I hope I did belt tensioner, timing belt, and water pump. Yes, I did. And once again, all of that can be done from right there. But let's do this one first. So this one is just a simple case of changing out the oil and changing the oil filter. Okay, so the oil filter is this lovely little thing over here. It's supposed to be a bright blue color. So we'll zoom in on it so you can see which part it is. Slide it off. Slap the new one on. There we go. That's simple. And then it's just a simple case of bringing this thing over, lining it up with a plug. It's about over there. And then just simply pulling out the drain plug. As you can see, that black gunk is flowing out of the engine. That means that it was, well, really, really bad. Because your oil is supposed to be like a nice golden color. So now it's simply a case of dropping the engine down. Well, dropping the car down again. Opening up the bonnet. And going to the oil fill cap. See, it's supposed to be that bright yellow orange color. And there we go. So we spent some money obviously putting in new oil. We've replaced the oil filter. That should be this car done and dusted. Yes, it is. And we made a total profit of $149. Okay, so on this one, it is the timing part. So once again, we go into the engine view and we drop down to the side over here. As you can see, the water pump and the belt tensioner, just like in the very first repair job we did, needs to be replaced. So remove the timing belts now, or the serpentine belts. Remove the water pump. Remove the idle roller. And then the crankshaft pulley needs to come off as well. And then the timing belt cover can be removed. And then we've got access to our very worn timing belt. And now it's a big case of slapping on the new one. Nice and pretty. Putting the timing belt cover back on. Okay, and now putting all these things back into place. So once again, the crankshaft pulley we'll put on first. We'll put on the idle roller second. And then the water pump third. Okay, now we can put the serpentine belts back on. One on the top, one on the bottom. And then the belt tensioner will go on as well. And once that is in place, that means this car is done and dusted. So some of the jobs start becoming easy. And as you can see, the more you start learning about the game, you start realizing where certain parts sit. It becomes relatively quick. And as you can see, we've got 1,000 experience points now. So that means we can come over here and we can finally do the fast unbolting. Oh my gosh, what's happening to my English today? And I'll show you the benefit of that now. Hopefully the next job is a bit of a big job so that we can possibly have a look at moving through it relatively quickly. But we're going to sell all the parts that were busted. So just to give you an idea. So the old oil filter, I only get $4 for it. The old belt tensioner, also $4. The old water pump is $3. And the old timing belt is $21. So it's not a shitload of money that you're making off of it. But obviously every dollar helps. Because I know, for example, later on, for the paint shop, you need 5,000 XP is the minimum requirement just to be able to try and open this. But then obviously once you've reached the XP, you need to pay money to actually unlock it. Now for the path test, now this is where, I think I mentioned in the last video, where the suspension and brakes is tested. This only needs 2,500 XP to unlock. But I know for a fact that it costs you $15,000 to add that extension onto your workshop. So obviously every dollar that comes in is beneficial for us. So general engine control and repair. Let's take that job. I like engine jobs. Let's wait for that to game up quickly. And then we could possibly also do the other job where the car is a little bit hard to control. So this one, the engine block. Okay, this is a massive job because we need to replace the engine block. Now, in order to replace the engine block, you need to strip everything from the engine. So this is possibly a good job to do. So let's buy the parts first. I need an engine block, an engine coil, and a serpentine belt B. Engine block 14. No, don't buy anything. Block. Engine block 14. There we go. We need the serpentine belt B. Serpentine belt B. Where's belt B? Serpentine belt A. Serpentine belt B. I think it's just the standard serpentine belt B that we need. Yep, and an engine ignition coil. So it's that one. And then the coil itself. Ignition coil, that one. Okay, so this definitely will have to be moved over to the lifter. We're going to move the oil pan over again because we actually need to drain the oil from this. Okay, grab the oil drain, move it underneath, and we'll place it right there. Access that, drain the oil. Now you can see there was nothing wrong with the oil that was in the car, but unfortunately in order to get the engine block out, the crankshaft needs to be removed. And the crankshaft is located under the sump, under the oil pan. That's the crankshaft over there. But before we can even think about removing that, the gearbox needs to come off, the entire headers, the pistons, the spark plugs, your fuel injectors, your manifolds, your camshafts, all of that needs to be removed. So we'll take off the oil filter, we'll remove everything we can from underneath here. And once again, that means removing the tires as well. Okay, then removing the axle. Now this you guys have obviously seen me do quite a couple of times, is removing these tires. Now trust me, most of the jobs require you to remove the tires, unless it's something that can be accessed through the engine bay on top itself. So remove the axle, remove the drive shaft, and now it's a case of I need to get rid of that starter. I keep forgetting to do that, but I think if we drop this down, we're going to stick to the top, and we're going to do everything off the top before we remove that engine block. So drop it back down. Open up the hood. If you wanted to, we could actually remove the hood, but there's no point in doing that because it actually is accessible from everything else. Okay, so let's start at the very top over here. We'll remove the throttle. We'll remove the intake manifold, and this is where you'll be able to see things are being loosened a lot faster. So we'll take out the fuel injection rail. We will then end up removing the ignition coils on top. And then we remove the engine head cover. Okay, now this is where your camshafts and your spark plugs sit. So we'll quickly remove the spark plugs. There's nothing wrong with them, they're all in pretty good condition, but in order for us to continue, we have to remove the timing section over here on the side. And we also need to remove the exhaust manifold, along with the starter. So we'll remove the starter before I forget that again. We'll pull off the exhaust manifold cover, and then we'll remove the exhaust manifold itself. There we go, that piece is off. Now, it's simply a case of removing all the timing sections once again, pulling off the belts, removing the crankshaft pulley, removing the idle roller, along with the water pump. Now we will also have to pull off the alternator, because the alternator is connected to the engine block, and we will also have to pull off the power steering pump, because that's also connected to the engine block. So now we can remove the timing belt cover. Okay, the timing belt, and now for the cam gears themselves. Now this allows us to access it from the top and actually slide out the camshafts. Now this allows us to remove the engine head. Okay, now through there we can see down into the 4 pistons that this car has got. So we'll remove 1 piston, 2 piston, 3 piston, 4 piston. 4 piston, there we go. Okay, so the pistons are out. The engine block looks to be standing alone, but obviously I'll need to remove the gearbox first and then also pull the camshaft from underneath. I don't think there's anything else I can do from the top of the vehicle, so we'll lift it up again. Okay, so now that we're here at the bottom, let's start off with the gearbox first. We'll pull the gearbox, remove the clutch pressure plate, or first the release bearing, then the plate itself, then the clutch pressure plate, sorry, just the clutch plate, and then the flywheel. Okay, now we need to get underneath, because we need to remove these little crankshaft bearing caps that holds it in place. And now we're looking at a nice pipe over there, but sometimes it'll just clip through when you're obviously trying to access some of the parts. And this now allows us to pull out the crankshaft. Now, as far as I can see, if we look around here, there is nothing else connected to the engine block. The front exhaust section is not connected to anything right now because the manifold has been removed. So it should simply be a case now that when I drop the car, I can remove the engine block. Okay, and there we go. The engine block is out. So now if we look down into that engine, there's nothing in there. The only thing still left in there is the intake filter, the air intake, the ABS module, the car battery, and the brake pumps. So there's nothing left inside there. Now the nice thing is I've got quite a couple of DLCs running, and one of them is the performance and modifications mod. Now, well, DLC. So if I wanted to, this is a customer's car, this job type does not allow to make an engine swap. But if this was my own vehicle that I bought, because I've stripped out the entire engine now, I'll be able to swap it out. So for example, this car is standard, I think it's a 1.4 litre engine. I think I am able to drop either a 1.6 or a V8 engine into this, and obviously then kick its performance into overdrive. But now it's simply a case of, let's put that new engine block in, and you will see the difference almost straight away. So as you can see, bright, shiny, and new. It's always beautiful when you put in a new engine block, especially when everything else comes together and everything else is brand new. The car or the engine just looks absolutely stunning. So from the top over here, what we can actually do is we can put on the power steering module now. We can slap the alternator back on as well. And there's nothing else that we can really do at this point, because we need to put the crankshaft in first, tie the crankshaft into, fasten the crankshaft into position, put on the sump underneath, and then we'll only be able to drop the pistons in, and then the headers, the camshaft, the cam gears, all of that. So, raise it up. Okay, so let's go in through the bottom over here, and let's put that crankshaft back into place. Okay, now it's also simply a case of we just need to fasten them in place with the crankshaft covers. Choose the next one. Sorry, it's the crankshaft bearing caps. Now I do want to reiterate, this game will teach you quite a lot. I don't even want to call it a game, it's more of a program, it's a simulation. So it will teach you quite a bit. However, it doesn't cover a lot. So in total, it's about 92% accurate as to basically how things are done. This is more giving you the idea of where everything goes, instead of the fact of you being able to do it yourself. So please, if anybody's watching this, don't go to the garage and start ripping your mom or your dad's car apart. It's a lot more complicated than that. There are a lot more tools involved than just standard bolts holding everything together. And the last thing I need is for you guys to pull your own car or someone else's car apart. So it's about 90% accurate. It's more of just an education so that you have a general idea of what components actually go into an engine, where the components sit, and roughly that when your car goes in for service and they tell you that they've had to replace the headers or spark plug or the crankshaft or the camshaft itself, you'll be able to say, okay, I've got a rough idea that if I had to look at my engine, I've got a rough idea where it is. So yes, to a certain degree, it is educational, but not to the point where you can go outside and start DIYing that shit. Okay, so we were able to put the pistons back in, we put the engine head back on, and now we are able to slide the camshafts back into place as well. Now that also allows us to replace the exhaust manifold. There we go. And that allows us to put the exhaust manifold cover on as well. So that is everything in the front part of this engine done. Now let's quickly jump over here, put the cam gears on. Now we can put the timing belt back on. Timing belt cover. And then the crankshaft pulley along with the idle roller and the water pump. Okay, and there we go. All three of those are in place. Now the two belts, and then the tensioner as well. Okay, so all of those parts are now back on. So let's put the fuel rail back in, and the exhaust manifold on as well. Sorry, the intake manifold, not the exhaust manifold. The exhaust manifold is in the front. And that allows us to now put the throttle back on. So if we jump over this side, we can now put the engine head cover back on. Fasten those down. Okay, then if we look from the top, we are able to drop our spark plugs into place. And that also allows us to put the ignition coils over it as well. And last ignition coil. And that part is done. Now if we have a look around here, it doesn't look like there's anything on the main body of the motor, the engine itself, that needs to be done from the top. Everything else is now from the bottom. So let's lift this car up. Okay, and now we can put the sump tank back underneath, as well along with the oil filter. Okay, and now that that's on, we can start putting the gearbox back on. So we'll start with the flywheel, then the clutch plate, the clutch pressure plate. The bearing comes next. There we go. And then the gearbox itself. Slap that big boy on. And then the drive shaft. There we go. And then the axle on either side. And then the wheels on either sides of those. Okay, so we'll jump over to the other side. Front axle once again. And the wheel. Okay, there is one more thing we need to do in the engine, because if you remember, in order to strip the gearbox, we had to remove the starter. Now, I am going to be dropping the car in any case, because I need to put the hood back on the car. If you guys remember, I ended up taking that off. So, let's quickly drop the car. Okay, so let's access the engine first, and let's put the starter back into place. There we go. Now it should be a case of everything on the car has been replaced. The engine block, the ignition coil, and the serpentine belt. Now, money spent on this job is over $1,600. Got $839 times 2 for obviously bonuses for completing all the tasks and completing the job. So we made a total profit of $3,357 on this job. Now we're not going to finish it just yet, because we need to put the hood back on. And that is it. And because we removed the sump tank, we need to replace the oil. And there we go. Okay, so oil's been replaced, car's been put back together, engine block has been replaced, timing belt has been replaced, and the ignition coil has been replaced. Total now is $3,357 still. So I finished the job. Beautiful. So now we are sitting on a decent amount. We've got $5,414 in total, 1,208 experience. We've got 4 jobs in here, only 2 that we can do. Sloppy car steering and car is hard to control, but we will get to those in the next episode. I really do hope you guys are enjoying this. I am loving it. It's taking me back, because it's been quite a while since I started a new game on this. I've gone pretty far into the game as to later on when you're building your own cars, you're going to auctions, you're buying cars, you're stripping down cars, you're setting faster times, quarter mile, half mile, and a mile in total on the drag strip. So it's nice coming back and starting off from the beginning again, and obviously it shows all of you guys what this game is capable of. Now, if you guys are enjoying this, by all means, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see all you beautiful people in my next video. But obviously until then, cheers.